Let's begin by talking about King David. You remember this story, how when he was a boy tending sheep in Bethlehem, Samuel the prophet sent for him and anointed him as a future king in front of his father and of all of his brothers. Although he was the youngest and least significant son in that family, God chose him. And we remember his career, how he volunteered to defend God's honor against Goliath, the Philistine who was mocking the God of Israel, and how because of that triumph, he entered into service in Saul's household. To make a long story short, eventually he replaced Saul, but not without years of combat and struggle, battles, bloodshed, and lots of suffering, decades of rough life on the road, on campaign. And even after becoming king in Hebron, it took him 7 years before he could rule in Jerusalem and unite Israel. But now, as we look in on him today, he is at peace. All around him, his enemies have been subdued, his kingdom is stable, and he has a nice place to live, his palace made of cedar. But he is not content. He is unsettled, but not for himself as though he needed more stuff. Rather, it's because while he lives in luxury in a cedarwood home, he knows that the Ark of the Covenant, the place where God's presence dwells among his people, is still in a tent, just as it has been ever since the Exodus journey from Mount Sinai on into Israel. And it pains him. He well knows all that God has done for him. And as the psalm he wrote says, "What return can I make to the Lord for all of the good that he has done for me?" And so he purposes to build a temple for the Lord, a fitting place where God's glory might dwell. Well, David wants to build a house for the Lord, but it's not to be. However, God will build a house for David. That is, he will build a dynasty. His son will always sit upon the throne. He will be a descendant of great dignity. And there is a promise to him. The promise is, I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. This promised house of David will be an eternal kingdom, an enduring throne, a dynasty for all ages. And 1,000 years later, we heard one of his descendants, Joseph, the son of Jacob, is betrothed to Mary, and it is to her that the angel Gabriel comes. Now, we are so familiar with that story of the Annunciation, I think, that sometimes we overlook it. You know, it's part of the Rosary. It's a common theme in religious art. We probably have an image like that in our homes, or if we don't, we certainly have one in our minds. We know what it looks like. But for today, the Church invites us to consider the Annunciation in the light of Advent. Yeah, I know Christmas is coming. Father gave us the 24-hour warning just a few minutes ago. But let's try to stay in Advent just a little longer to prepare ourselves in expectant hope for the coming of our Savior. During this Advent season, we have read Isaiah, and we have heard the prophecies that the Jews longed to see fulfilled concerning the Messiah. Indeed, it goes all the way back to the 3rd chapter of Genesis, from the very beginning in the Garden of Eden, when God first promised to undo original sin by sending a Redeemer who would crush the head of Satan. And the chosen people has waited a long time for the Messiah. Through slavery, wars, conquests, captivity, occupation, and rebuilding, watching and waiting, it seems as though the Messiah will never come. You know, we look to our children, and the 4 weeks of Advent before Christmas are intolerable and interminable for them. They just can't wait. Santa's not coming soon enough. And yet those 4 candles on the Advent wreath are supposed to represent 1,000 years each, 4,000 years from the creation of the world to the coming of the Messiah. And now, in the fullness of time, Gabriel comes to Mary and asks her to accept her mission, asks her to bring the Messiah into the world, asks her to be his mother. She could have said no. But as Gabriel said when he greeted her, she is full of grace. Mary never experienced original sin. She was preserved from it as a special grace. So she has never experienced the effects of original sin. Her mind has never been darkened. Her will has never been weakened. She could have declined, but she said yes. More precisely, she said, "Behold the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done unto me according to thy word." She said yes with the full knowledge in her mind that there would be problems and difficulties and challenges and that the course would be complicated. Mary said yes in her will and conformed her will to the will of God and humbly, obediently trusted him. And so the long-awaited Messiah enters the world. Blessed is the fruit of her womb. Now, St. Paul takes the long view when he calls this the mystery kept secret for the ages. The mystery is that the promised Messiah no longer comes only for the Jews, but that he comes for all nations, all peoples, all races. He comes for all of humanity. This is the fulfillment of God's purpose. It is the gospel that Paul preaches and that Jesus proclaimed. And we, my friends, are blessed to have this knowledge, even though it comes with the obligation to share it. You see, David asked, "What return can I make to the Lord for all he has given me?" And Mary said, "May it be done unto me according to thy word." And Paul wrote that God will strengthen us to give him the glory which is his due. As we make our final preparations to remember Jesus as a baby coming at Christmas, we would do well to remember David's gratitude and desire to honor the Lord, Mary's humble and obedient yes when she offered her body, mind, and soul to God, and Paul's zeal to tell the world about Jesus and the salvation he offers.